I got a feeling that something ain't going right, and I'm worried about the human soul. I got a feeling, if I would have had the chance to make the decision, every man could walk this earth on equal conditions. Every child could do more than just dream of a star. Of this life and death would cease, and I put it into if I had the chance to make the decision, every man could walk this earth.
I call the experience prism. And hopefully that will be a tool or an instrument that will help us think about embodiment in this space throughout the rest of this collaboration, but also might be an interesting tool for you to use in the course of your everyday life. So let me back up a second and just say a little bit about what sort of the broad frame. So one of the papers I asked you to look at makes a distinction between four kinds of hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is just a fancy word for thinking about interpretation or theory of interpretation. um, Theory of interpretation it's got a long history. For this context, we're thinking about lived experience as a form of interpretation. The body is a mode of interpretation, a mode of engaging with the world in everyday lived experience. And most of the time, the elements or the structures of experience are concealed from us. They sort of hang in the backdrop, and they are working silently to sort of make sense of our situation. You could think of these different components of experience almost like a mixing board. That's how I imagine it in my mind. And if you dial sort of up and down, different elements of experience come to the fore. If you take, say, for example, what I call project, which is the narrative component or the temporal component of experience. Okay, so I was talking about hermeneutics, and I think I skipped over an important feature of why the experience prism. And that was I introduced these four kinds of hermeneutics, particularly in health contexts. And these I'm taking from a philosopher by the name of Paul Ricoeur, who identifies very broad ideas about how interpretation works in culture. And he identifies two distinctions which are important for his context: the hermeneutics of suspicion and the hermeneutics of recovery. The hermeneutics of suspicion he has in mind for thinkers like Freud and Marx. And basically the idea is that there's something we think the world is one way, we're acting in the world in one way, making sense of our lives in one way, but really there's something else beneath it. Whether it's childhood, experiences, we think we're mad at our boss, but really we're mad at our father. We think, that we really want that house in the suburbs, but it turns out that just serves an different economic class, etc. There's this idea that something about our ordinary experience is not quite what we think it is. And in the context of health, this is sort of an important form of
Awesome. Thank you.
interpretation and making sense. It's what we're doing. We're doing diagnostics. We think it's one thing, or it presents
No, I
as
think it's
one
all
thing,
good
but
now.
maybe there's something else going on there, and we have this sense of suspicion, and we're looking to see what might be beneath the surface. And there's all sorts of forms like this, in not only in health but in life.
Back there.
and it's important for uncovering and diagnosing otherwise unhealthy features of our experience in the world. There's the hermeneutics of recovery, which is the idea that something in the past was pretty good, and in the present it's gotten worse, but we can get back to that. We can get back to that golden age in the past. You see this in many forms of politics, but you also see it that when we just think of healing in health, that is a hermeneutics of recovery.
That's what I think I saw that option.
Then there's also what I think is these are forms of interpretation that can be thought of as responses to what I call, this is just my way of trying to characterize it, a hermeneutics of optimization. And this is the idea that
people come late to a lecture.
Back in the past, things were pretty primitive, but if we use the right technology and the right instruments, the right ideas, we can get ever more control over the world, ever more control over our bodies. And this is the objectifying form of thinking about nature and the world that we find in the Enlightenment. And it really animates modern technological life, economic life, but also obviously in the context of health, every time we build an instrument to intervene to try to improve somebody's health, we are participating in the hermeneutics of optimization. And basically, my claim is that these forms of interpretation are great, and they're deployed when they're deployed in the right way. They're crucial and indispensable. But collectively, they also leave something out, and that is circumstances where our current mode of understanding is inadequate to the circumstances that are coming before us, right? So we can think of emergent circumstances like artificial intelligence or campuses like this, where we're trying to figure out how to make it work and what's the etiquette, and there's these new affordances in the world. But you can also think of, in a health context, in an embodied context, you're a downhill skier and you're just about to go to the Olympics, and you get into a car accident, a sort of a silly car accident, and it breaks your foot, and you'll never ski quite the same way again. This can be not only devastating and sort of to the body, but it's devastating to a certain understanding of self, a certain understanding of the environment, a certain understanding of the affordances of your equipment and what they're for, and your way of coping and negotiating the world in an ordinary, everyday way. And this is a form of interpretation, or this is a circumstance that requires a form of interpretation that the others don't have. And so I invented or came up with this sort of the experience prism as a sort of way of distilling out crucial features of phenomenology that I thought were really helpful for making sense of these ambiguous circumstances. But phenomenology as a discipline is very impenetrable and is very difficult to sort of pull off the shelf unless you spend a lot of time thinking about it and caring about it. I was trying to think of something that was a little bit more portable and usable in all kinds of contexts, including this sort of context. And that was the sort of the birth of the experience prism. So let me then return to that idea. The experience prism imagines or sees sort of the structures of experience. It's really broken down into three basic components, and these are not. I don't want to reduce it to these components, because every experience, I would say, has all of these. But we can dial up the gain on one of them and dial down the gain on the others, and that changes the qualities and textures of experience. And so Dr. Lucas last time led us through a nice exercise in an embodied experience. We started paying attention to our environment. And in many ways, what we did in that moment is we dialed down what I call project. This is the sort of the temporal narrative component. We weren't telling a story about things. We weren't sort of making sense of the moment and the circumstances in light of where it is that we're going or where it is that we came from. We were just, and it was probably unusual. At the very least, you may have gone to a meditative practice or a yoga practice, but doing it online in a class was probably unusual. And so some of the background habits about how to cope with that situation was new. And so the second component felt probably a little uncanny. And then the third component, the sensory component, really listening to the world around you, listening to the sounds, noticing the light. You really dialed up the gain on that component. So I call that the soma. It could be sort of from Merleau-Ponty's notion of the flesh is another way of identifying this or thinking about this. But it's really the way the body is tied up with the world, and the meaning of our experience is really tied up with those sensual experiences. In fact, I would argue that our experience of value is intimately tied up with those sensations. And then we make sense of those sensations, and we repeat those sensations with the sense making that we have of them with project and practice. I'm sorry, with project, and then they get taken up as practices, and then they become the kind of background thing that just animates our lives without us thinking about it. In the same way that you now speak a language, and you don't think about speaking a language; it just kind of flows out of you. And that's practice. Practice is, the ways we walk down the street, or we know what direction to turn our head and look when we're crossing the street, unless you're an American in the UK, in which case it gets dangerous. But these are all animating features and structural features of our experience. And one of the things that when we come into an environment like this, when we come into a space none of us have ever really navigated before and know how to act, is we don't have those background practices. And in many ways, we also don't have a coherent story about how this is going to work and what its structure will be. And that's going to raise all kinds of new and interesting sensations. And so what I'd like to do is for the rest of our time is engage in an exercise where you all have an opportunity to explore this space and pay attention to, sort of dial down the gain on the other components, and each in turn really focus on what narrative, what story you're telling, and then what practices do you have or not have, what's showing up, how are you stumbling, what's not working, what's working well, what's new, what's curious, what habits of mind are you using to cope with this new environment. And then finally, we'll look at soma to really focus on, as you're navigating this space, what does it feel like? Are you anxious? Are you frustrated? Are you happy? And this is really going to be interesting in the future? Or what does it feel like? So paying attention to those deep textures of in this case, many ways, sort of introspective textures. But also the sensory ones, as you look and see. I'll tell you a story. I was driving my car. I just told the story yesterday to my students, but I was just driving my car, and I rather like my car, and I went over a bump, and at the bottom of the car, like, grounded out a little bit. And, oh man, I just felt it in my body, just sort of, in a way, my body really, it really was a feeling. It was just as if something, I had like bumped my elbow or something, or somebody was swinging something, and I want to, I kind of feel fast. I flinch, right? Our tools become ways of extending ourselves into the world. These are extended bodies, and what we're doing by moving onto this campus in these avatars and navigating this space is extending our bodies in new and interesting ways. And so the borders of our bodies become porous. And what we'll be doing in the next few minutes is exploring the ways in which we're attuned and not attuned to this space, and to watch ourselves become more attuned over the course of this semester. And that's what I'd like this tool to help us do. So what I'd like to ask you all to do is to wander around for 5 minutes, and then I will call you all back. But while you're wandering around for that 5 minutes, to ask, what habits of attention are you relying on here? And what are you doing automatically to stay oriented or functioning? This is practice. This is what we're going to do first, is practice. So if you would, just take 5 minutes. It's 4:34 now. We'll come back at 4:40.